Welcome, friends. We're so glad you're here. I'm Olivia B,
I'm Quincy T.
and this is Hope Talks, where we have real conversations about life healing and finding hope along the way. Okay, so we all know the feeling, right? You just want to take a quick peek at your phone, see what's going on, and then somehow an hour has gone by and uh, you're swimming in all that negativity.
Yeah, drowning in it sometimes it feels like.
Exactly. And, you sent over a whole bunch of really interesting stuff for us to look at, articles about trends on social media, some deep dives into like the actual brain science behind anxiety.
It's a really fascinating area.
It is. And it all kind of points back to this thing we've been talking about, this doom scrolling. It feels like it's everywhere these days.
It's become kind of a hallmark of our times, hasn't it? That pull to constantly check to see what's happening, especially when the world feels, I don't know, like a little bit shaky,
A bit unstable.
like
Yeah.
things are a bit out of control. And, with everything going on, like the global health stuff we've been through, the economic shifts, all the social unrest, it makes sense that people want to stay
Right. You
informed.
feel like you have to keep up.
Exactly. But as you've been seeing, that drive to stay informed can sometimes, well, it can kind of backfire.
Yeah, it can definitely take you down a rabbit hole. And for this deep dive, that's exactly what we're going to get into. We really want to understand what's going on in our minds. Like, what is the psychology behind this urge to just keep scrolling through all that negative news? But even more importantly, we want to give people some tools to deal with it, some real practical things they can actually do.
Exactly.
It's not about sticking our heads in the sand and ignoring what's going on. It's about figuring out a way to be informed without getting totally overwhelmed, without it messing with your well being.
Finding that balance is key.
Absolutely. So where should we start? Should we just jump right into like what doom scrolling actually is? Because it seems obvious, but maybe it's a bit more complicated than just reading bad news.
Yeah, I think it is more than just like passively reading bad news. It's definitely about taking in all that negativity.
Hmm.
But the thing that really defines doom scrolling is that it's compulsive. You know, you just keep scrolling and scrolling, even though you feel worse and worse the more you do it.
You just can't stop.
Yeah, it's not just about staying informed. It becomes an almost automatic thing. And I think for a lot of people, it's fueled by this desire to find some kind of answer, some certainty in all the chaos. Or maybe it's even like they want to brace themselves for the worst. Like if they know what the worst is, they can somehow handle it.
It's like if you look away, you're going to miss something important and then you won't be prepared. But what I'm really interested in is the brain science. Like, why are our brains so drawn to this? It doesn't seem logical.
Well, there's a few things going on. One of the big ones is something called the negativity bias. Basically, our brains are wired to pay more attention to negative stuff than positive stuff. We focus on threats more than rewards.
Why would that be?
Think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. Back in the day, noticing a saber-toothed tiger lurking in the bushes was way more important for survival than, spotting a patch of delicious berries. It was a matter of life or death.
Oh, I see.
And that ancient wiring, it's still with us. Bad news triggers a stronger emotional response, releases stress hormones that put us on high alert. So that negative headline, it just grabs our attention more powerfully than a positive one.
So it's like our caveman brains are freaking out over Twitter. Like our survival instincts are getting hijacked by the news cycle.
It's a good way to put it. And then there's something called the uncertainty loop, which I think speaks to a lot of the anxieties people are feeling right now, given, the current world situation. Uncertainty is just inherently uncomfortable. It creates anxiety. And our brains, they crave information as a way to resolve that discomfort, to feel more in control.
I can see that.
Doom scrolling can feel like you're trying to find those answers, to figure out what's going to happen and maybe regain some sense of control. But the thing is, the information we find often doesn't actually provide that reassurance, and it can actually make the anxiety worse.
So you're looking for a way to calm down, but you end up even more stressed out.
Right. It's a vicious cycle. And then, to make matters even more complicated, we have to factor in dopamine and what we call variable reward.
Dopamine, like the feel-good chemical.
Yeah. And it's tied to this idea of variable rewards, which is something that those articles on social media engagement talk about a lot. News feeds and social media platforms are designed to keep us hooked, and they do that by making things unpredictable. You never know what you're going to see when you scroll. Sometimes it's a big news story, sometimes it's just noise.
But either way, you keep scrolling.
Exactly. And that unpredictability makes it more addictive. It's kind of like a slot machine, you know? You get that occasional win finding a piece of information that feels really important, and that keeps you pulling the lever, even if most of the time you're losing.
So we're basically gambling with our news feeds.
In a way, yes. And then, of course, we have to talk about FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Oh, yeah, FOMO. That's a big one, especially now when everyone's connected all the time.
Exactly. We worry that if we disconnect, even for a little bit, we'll miss some crucial update or we won't be part of the conversation. It makes it so hard to put our phones down, even when we know that what we're reading is stressing us out.
So it all ties back into that need to feel in control, like you have to stay on top of everything.
Hey, if you've made it this far, you're officially part of the Hope Crew, and we've got something special for you. We put together a set of 20 wallpapers for your phone. Quick reminders to pause, unplug, and protect your peace. You can grab it totally free in the description box below. And while you're there, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment with the word unplugged so we know you're one of the action takers. We always love seeing who's really in this with us.
Okay, so we've got our caveman brains fixated on negativity. We've got the anxiety of uncertainty, the dopamine rush of variable rewards, and the constant pressure of FOMO. It's no wonder we doom scroll, right? But let's talk about the actual impact. What are the consequences of all this negativity? Does it actually hurt us?
It can, actually, and the effects can be pretty widespread. We see increased levels of anxiety and stress, and even symptoms of depression in people who regularly doom scroll.
Not surprising.
And it's not just about feeling bad, there's a real physical impact too. Sleep disruption is a big one. That blue light from our screens can mess with our sleep cycles, and just the mental stimulation of processing all that negative stuff right before bed makes it hard to unwind and get a good night's sleep.
You go to bed all wound up.
Right. And then there's that feeling of helplessness and despair. When you're constantly exposed to problems without any solutions, it can lead to this sense that nothing will ever get better, that you have no control. And that can be really demoralizing.
I can see how that would be so draining, just focusing on problems all the time.
It is. And over time, it can contribute to burnout, or even what's called compassion fatigue, where you become emotionally exhausted from constantly absorbing other people's suffering. And on top of all that, research suggests that too much screen time and information overload can actually shorten our attention spans, which makes it harder to focus and process information in other parts of our lives.
So it's not just about our moods, it affects our ability to function.
Right.
Wow, that's a lot. So we know it's bad, but what can we do about it? What are some actual steps people can take to break free?
There are a lot of things we can do. And the good news is, a lot of them are really simple, practical things. One of the first things I recommend is setting time limits for news consumption. Most smartphones have built-in features to help you track and limit how much time you spend on certain apps.
So you can actually set a timer for how long you're going to look at the news.
Exactly. It just brings some awareness to your habits and helps you set some boundaries. Another helpful thing is to choose specific times during the day to check the news, rather than constantly refreshing your feeds. Maybe set aside 15 minutes in the morning and another 15 minutes in the evening to catch up.
So it's more like a scheduled appointment with the news rather than this constant stream.
Right. And it's really important to avoid checking the news right before bed. Give your mind a chance to relax and unwind before you try to sleep.
That makes sense. Okay, so set time limits, schedule news check-ins. What else?
Well, this might seem obvious, but it's really important to think about what you're actually consuming. Actively curate your news and social media feeds. Take a look at the accounts you follow. Are they providing balanced perspectives? Do they ever share positive stories? Do they offer solutions? If not, maybe it's time to unfollow them, or at least mute them. Try to find sources that offer more constructive and nuanced reporting.
So take control of your information and environment. Don't just let the algorithms decide what you see.
Right. And then there's the idea of mindful consumption, which is all about bringing awareness to your habits. Before you automatically reach for your phone to check the news, stop for a second and ask yourself why you're doing it. What are you hoping to get out of it? How is it going to make you feel? Just that little pause can be really powerful in breaking that automatic cycle. And if you start to feel overwhelmed or anxious as you're scrolling, make a decision to stop. Step away from the phone.
It sounds so simple, but I bet it's really hard to do.
It can be, yeah. But with practice, it gets easier. And another important strategy is to find healthy replacements for that doom scrolling habit. A lot of times, we reach for our phones out of boredom or loneliness or procrastination. So think about other things you could do with that time. Things that nourish you instead of depleting you. Maybe read a book, a real paper book, not on a screen, or do some exercise, engage in a hobby, spend time with friends and family, anything that brings you joy and helps you relax.
Anything but stare at your phone.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of managing notifications. Turn off those breaking news alerts and social media notifications. They're just constantly interrupting you and pulling you back into that cycle of checking and scrolling. You could even try batching your notifications so you're only checking them at specific times.
I can see how that would be helpful. All that buzzing and dinging just keeps you on edge like something's about to happen.
Exactly. And finally, consider incorporating regular digital detox periods into your routine. Schedule some time, maybe a no news Sunday or a whole social media free weekend to completely disconnect from screens. Give your mind a chance to rest and reset.
That sounds amazing, actually. Okay, so those are some great practical tips, but you also talked about reframing our relationship with news. What does that mean?
I think it's important to remember that being informed doesn't mean being instantly updated on every single thing that's happening. The world is going to fall apart if you don't check your phone for a few hours. Instead of just passively consuming all this information, think about how you can actually make a difference in the areas you care about. If the big global issues are feeling overwhelming, maybe focus on local initiatives in your community. Volunteer for a cause you believe in. Taking action can be a powerful way to counter those feelings of helplessness.
So it's about shifting from feeling like a powerless bystander to an active participant.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's about being more discerning about what you consume, rather than just mindlessly scrolling through endless negativity. It's about choosing peace and well-being over anxiety and panic.
That's a really powerful message. So, just to kind of bring it all together, we've talked about how our brains are wired to focus on negativity, how uncertainty triggers anxiety, how dopamine and variable rewards keep us hooked, and how FOMO pushes us to stay constantly connected.
And we've explored the very real consequences of all that: increased anxiety, stress, potential depression, sleep problems, feelings of helplessness, burnout, shorter attention spans, cognitive overload. It's a lot to consider.
But the good news is, we're not just victims of our biology or the technology, we have choices. We can take steps to manage our news intake, set boundaries, and protect our mental health.
Absolutely. And I would encourage everyone listening to think about the things you can control in your own life. What are the ways you can engage with the world that make you feel empowered and fulfilled rather than drained and anxious?
That's a great question to think about. How can you be informed without being overwhelmed? Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a little challenge. For the next 24 hours, try this. Every time you catch yourself reaching for your phone to scroll, pause, take one deep breath, then ask yourself, what am I really looking for right now? Maybe it's connection, comfort, or a quick escape. Whatever it is, try giving yourself that in a different way. Step outside, message a friend, or just take a moment to be still. And if you can, pick 1 hour today to go completely screen free. Just you and the world around you. Let us know how it goes in the comments below. We'd love to hear your experience.